So we heard a lot about the DetNet here already today. And there were two elements that were coming together. On one side, it's the science that we heard about, the in vivo and in vitro science, particularly the new data on in vitro that were generated. And then, of course, the access to this data through an expert net for a group of experts that then give the right interpretation. Let me start with you, David, if I may. How do you feel about it when you look both at the science on one side and then you look at the expert that are called upon in order to eventually write at the right labeling, at the right classification and labeling of a product? Is this working? You think it's going to work well?
Well, that's a huge question, Hans, and I'm sure we haven't got time to go into all of those aspects. Firstly, let me say I enjoyed the presentations and I found this it's a very exciting development. It's clearly a massive challenge to get all of the products labelled in the right way and in a meaningful way. And I certainly have worried personally in the past about the classifications that have been applied to a range of products. Now we have an exciting new way of doing it using in vitro methods. And what I find most encouraging here is that these steps forward are being taken, but they're being taken with in vitro methods, which have very largely been validated, but they're not just being taken at face value, they're being thoroughly evaluated with formulations where we understand how those formulations really behave in humans, so we're doing a great deal of benchmarking. I think that's terribly encouraging, because we certainly don't want to be in the situation where endless products are being labelled and the label becomes meaningless. We do want to have labels that are meaningful to consumers. And in that sense, I find it also encouraging when I was reading notes before coming that we're going to be looking very hard at what's happening in poison control centres. And I hope we're going to look in other places as well to find ways of assessing the health benefits of the classifications that we're making and the information we're delivering to consumers.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you for a moment. I'm sure we come back to you. You raised the point I wanted to go next to, which is poison control centers. So I wanna dig a little bit into that, because we had always the argument if you overlabel, that has all kinds of negative consequences from a poison control center point of view. But what's your perspective? I think you even had prepared one or two charts that you want to share. We can do that, or we can just go with it
this way.
I think, yeah. Although they are putting them up already, you see.
No.
Whatever you prefer.
I would prefer to say this.
Very good, super.
So just 1 or 2 sentences about the poison centers. I would say I calculated when I came here during the journey, and I would say it's about more than 3,000 calls to a poison center every day. And if you look at the percentage that we have in our poison center, about more than 300 calls concerning detergent and cleaning project every day at the poison center. And all these calls, or most of them, there's some kind of accident. So something has gone wrong with product safety. Every call leads to a poison center. There's at least a concern of something maybe wrong or some health damage at this level there. And what we do then in the poison center, the first point is that we call clinical risk assessment. So you know, risk assessment on a regulatory level, but we have to do it in any case. And for cleaning products and detergents, in most cases, the result is there's no risk of poisoning. So the patient can stay at home, no medical treatment, no transference to the medical system is necessary. And what is the basis for this? So this is grounded on 2 things, and one is of the full formula, that we get the formula of the thing, and the other thing is the labeling. So labeling is quite important for us, and we base our information on labeling. And usually today what we do, we would say all the products which are not labeled as corrosive, they usually can stay at home. So most of them. Not in all cases, in extreme exposures, of course, that we have to send them to the doctor, but usually they stay at home. And all the products which are labeled as corrosive, they somehow have to go to see a doctor at least. To see a doctor there, and we would hardly, or only in very exceptional cases, leave it at home if there's some ingestion, oral uptake of something which is labeled as corrosive. So this is where we stand now there, and we have to change the way how we evaluate this totally and to make it more important to go to the full formula if everything will be labeled as corrosive in the future. And even then, it will be rather complicated to leave a child at home and has taken up already something, and the label says to the mother or to the people there that this is corrosive. No, they will never understand. We will need a lot more talking, interpretation, talk to the medical doctors who treat these patients there. So therefore, to summarize, poison centers don't like overlabeling.
Okay, very good. That's a simple conclusion, which I'm sure we'll take away. By the way, while we are nicely discussing here up front, if you have a question that you want to ask to the panel, just raise your hand, and then we are happy to integrate it here into the session. I'd like to go to regulators next. I think Françoise has a beautiful chart where she said, what's in for the regulator? I think there were quite a few things there in the regulator. Maybe I'll start with you, Jacques. I mean, how do you feel about what's being discussed here? How do you feel about what's being proposed? Will it work?
Well, first of all, I think I would like to congratulate you for the work done. Without, let's say, understanding much of the detail behind, because it's quite complicated, as was expressed, I think, very clearly in the earlier presentations. We've seen some, let's say, earlier work also in our discussions directly with A.I.S.E, and I think it looks very good. It's in line with the COP regulation very clearly. It respects all the, let's say, regulations and the sort of rules behind it. And I think it has very clear advantages, as was very clearly described here, in terms of avoiding unnecessary testing, making sure that we use all the information available, trying to use in vitro data where these are validated and where these are, let's say, really appropriate. So I think it's a very good achievement, and I understand it's the first network, and I have not heard any other developments, unfortunately. Maybe there are other sectors doing it, but I think it's very good. If I may, I have two small comments.
Yeah.
One is that, but that's maybe just my lack of knowledge, that I think it would be nice to actually know who are the experts behind. And that is more clarity about who is actually providing the expert advice, so that people don't have any potential questions around that. I mean, this is related to the general discussions, I think, on using experts, which is very useful to know who are then the people providing it. And the other thing is, I think, what we already said when we met A.I.S.E a couple of weeks ago, and I understand not a lot of time has been available. My experts would really like to see some really worked out examples from A to Z, just to really understand what you're doing, how you're doing it. I know you provide information through these examples, etc. But I think it looks good. But you know, when you give this to really experts in the fields, they want to understand really the bits and the details and the nuts and bolts of every decision you take. So if that could be further provided, I think it will help everybody to understand and much better appreciate the system which has been built.
Very good, Jack. Why don't we follow up on those points right away? I'm just looking around who volunteers here to take the questions. I don't know. Yeah, Mira, you want to comment on who are the experts and how can we do something from A to Z?
Yeah, on the experts, I need to explain two things. Companies using the system will use their own experts. So those are not the external experts. What Françoise touched upon is the external experts, and these names will be known. I think they're already actually in the system as they are at the moment. So those names are given, the external experts, when you really are in a difficult situation.
But you will publish them then?
That will be published.
Okay.
To answer your first question, and the second question on a real example is also something that we're working on to provide, because this is not the first time we heard this question, and of course it will get things alive. You want to say something?
Yeah, Sylvie surely will want to say something about it. She's dying to say something in her chair. So it's already there. Excellent.
Well, question answered then. Huh?
Okay. And then, so this is how fast it works. But then on the second one, working something through from A to Z, I have seen this beautiful example of something being overlabeled many times. How difficult is it actually to do a concrete example? Can't be very hard. Or are there no companies volunteering a formula or so? Where is that stuck? Sylvie? Oh.
It's part of the explanatory note, and we started from relatively simple examples. And we need to work on more complex examples, so we need to gather more experience. But at least on the very fundamentals of applying the bridging principles, there are some elements there. So we have 3 cases, from simple to more complex. And we do need to work on more complex elements as well. Yeah.
Okay.
But again, we welcome further discussion, and yes, we want the companies to hopefully share a bit more of hands-on expertise, including in training of industry experts. That's another idea that is coming up, to organize trainings, face-to-face trainings, and use those more complex examples.
Okay, very good. Well, maybe we get some more insights here while we go around. Maybe we go next, Argen, to you. Any perspective, since we need a micro? We are a little short on micros here, just one for so many people. My apologies for that. So, I mean, you also look at it from a regulatory perspective, I'm sure, at what is being proposed here. So what's your reaction?
Yeah, thank you, Hans. First of all, I also want to congratulate. I think CLP offers here a cold lake of new waters, and A.I.S.E is the first one to jump in to test this new methodology. And we expect that this is really here a pilot, and that we from the enforcement authorities will face more and more such kind of approaches. So we also are thankful that the forum, the enforcement forum in ECHA, was also briefed a few weeks ago. And we could take some time to look into the material. And yeah, especially for us enforcement authorities, the transparency of the approach is very important. And as a enforcer, as an inspector, you really need then also this individual responsibility for the classification of the product from the perspective of the formulator, well documented, well maintained, because it should not happen that at the time the inspector makes his well-awaited visit to the company, that then the work starts for the formulator. So we, of course, should realize a system where the visit of the inspector does not create a lot of questions. I would not say the chaos, but you know that the work then starts once the inspector asks the question. So this we should try to implement into the system well ahead, so that the users of your system, the formulators, can wait for the visit of the enforcement authority well relaxed. I think that is what we should aim at, and that is what we would like to contribute from our side to the fine-tuning of the system, if I can say so.
Very good, super. I see Sylvie taking notes. This is very good. This is very welcome. I think I go to you, Krista, next. How does it feel from an enforcement agency? I mean, this all feels very complicated. We have in vitro methodology, an expert and all of that, but you need to deal with it at the end in the marketplace. You need to say whether this product is labeled correctly or not. So is this more complicated for you, or is the world becoming easier?
Well, I hope it's becoming easier, because using the calculation method is not always simple as well. But important is, of course, the safety of the consumer, and we would like to see products that are classified according to the inherent hazards of the mixture. And if everything is labeled as corrosive, then the consumer can no longer make it distinguish between the products that are really dangerous and products that are not. So we do not want to devaluate this symbol of corrosiveness. But on the other hand, of course, if we all agree we will accept this system of this dead net, it must be, of course, also very validated. And we've seen today that it has been validated. So far in the Netherlands, our inspectorate has accepted the system of framework formulations under the preparation directive. And it's worked very well for the last years, I think 20 years or so. So we also look at the poison center that we have, and if there's an increasing number of incidents. And if there's an increasing number of incidents, which we have at this moment with these liquid caps, then it's time to take action. But so far, the normal detergents are not classified on the Dutch market, and it has not been a problem. And I think this dead net is a great improvement if you look to the framework formulation system that we have. What is important, I think, is that it covers all of the market, or as much as possible, because if you have part of the market that uses dead net and the other part that doesn't use dead net, then it will still be confusing for consumers. So I think it's a real challenge that you get as many companies aboard that you can. And I don't, I hope that can be possible, because otherwise you will still have this confusing situation.
That's a good point. Actually, let's check that. We have it right now for 2 or 3 product categories, I believe, right? For cleaning products, for household cleaners, and so on. For 4? David says 4. So what's next steps here? Is it going to be done with 4? Will we do more? What's in the way? Vera?
Well, the intent is clearly to get more data in. One chunk of work has already been in execution by A.I.S.E to generate more in vitro data on on more market relevant formulations. And on top of that, we offer companies to put in their own data. So we have put up a data compensation system. So companies are really encouraged to share the data that they have or are generating with new in vitro methods, to share that with the DETnet, so they can basically get a bit of money out and basically help other companies to apply the same data for their classification purposes.
How robust are we in vitro data? Are we comfortable now that we're generating in vitro data that are reliable?
Well, I think with all the work that we've been doing in the vitro project, we are pretty confident about the skin methods for classification. The big difficulty has been from the start and is still the eye irritancy, because the validated methods are validated to either confirm positively ICAT1 or the most corrosive eye classification or non-classified, but the intermediate classification ICAT1, which we expect a lot of our detergents to fall into, is difficult to cover. I think we've done a great job by doing the ICE test, an isolated chicken eye test, in combination with histopathology, to get to further scientific certainty that actually the product is really an eye category 2. And we will publish that soon, and we have the intent to further seek validation of that method in official ways.
Okay, very good. Let me see how the audience is doing. Are you all still awake here one afternoon? Are you waiting for drinks or what? Nothing happened here. Well, there is. I had one question for Monique Goins from Berg, but she didn't show up. She had an emergency, so she shouldn't come. But I still want to ask the question. So you all need to now help me with answering that question. And the question is tied to the clip which we saw earlier, which was the 1,000 euro clip question, right? Who do we do all of this for? Is this for companies to perform according to regulation, for regulators to make sure and enforce it, that it's done correctly, and then at the end, possibly only for a poison control center that then reads the correct or the incorrect label? I mean, any reaction to that? I mean, we always say we do it for the consumer. David has a point of view. Yeah.
Well, I give you one reaction, and it's partly stimulated by what I heard earlier, which is measuring the effect. Because ultimately, of course, we don't want the consumer to become the experiment where we discover whether something is irritant or corrosive or not. But what I would quite like to hear other members of the panel's views on is whether we actually are making any measure of the effectiveness of these new regulations, and if we are, then against what background knowledge? Because I'm not sure that we actually have a measure of the current level of adverse effects to know whether what we're doing now is actually going to improve human or occupational health. And I think that comment could be applied more widely than just to skin and eye irritation effects. But maybe I'm wrong.
I knew with you on the panel I didn't have to worry about moderation. I knew you were going to help me on this. And I think this is now wonderful because we go over to exactly that question. I mean, how do we measure success? How do we measure success of CLP in 2015? Will we record fewer accidental ingestions with severe, or maybe, Herbert, you're nodding. You expecting any success there? Maybe the Michael can go over there.
So poison centers would be very happy that they can also contribute to this part there, no? Because they are not only doing the consultations, but they also record all cases. And they do it, traditionally they do it for their own purpose, then if they are asked the same question twice, then they can have already experience from the first case, so they can make an even better consultation, a more precise risk assessment there. And if we would be happy to contribute here to collect more systematically all the cases which are in focus for some things on this, and then we could report back, is that really the correct labeling, to see what's happening there. And I mentioned it to some degree, we are looking at eyes. We are not so much looking at the skin, so there's not that much happening there. But we could also mainly dealing with oral ingestions, oral uptake. No? And what we have there is that the mucosa of the gastrointestinal tract is rather similar to the eye. So if we can see what happens if something is swallowed by this and see the effects there, then we can report back and see whether this is eye category correctly or is that similarly. So we would really like to do this. Of course, poison centers cannot do it from the stand without any preparation. So there's some additional need for documentation of the cases. We will not need to have in detail if we only do it for our own purpose, but poison centers can learn this and they can do this, and I think we will be happy to provide this.
Excellent, very good, super. Any reaction from the regulatory side to that offer? Maybe, yeah, Krista?
Yeah, that is of course very helpful information, and our inspectorate is also for consumers possible to file complaints about products, and we will investigate these products. But also companies themselves must have a register of all the consumer complaints, and especially these complaints that are related to the hazard. So I think if you gather all this data, you could come up with some idea of what's happening, and if it's the CLP regulation offers a larger protection for the consumer or not. I think it's difficult to say at this moment, because I expect that formulations will also alter if CLP comes at force.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think definitely that the formulators will try to adjust their formulations also to the new situation. But I find it also important, besides these efforts, that we try to be more correct with our classification of the system and with the labeling, that we really also face the problem to communicate this new challenge of corrosivity under the CLP, that it is not only the pictogram anymore, but that CLP unfortunately forces us to read the label really in more detail to understand why is the corrosivity there. And one solution to this problem is maybe the effort which is taken here, that you try to be maybe more accurate with your classification, and that you maybe even avoid corrosivity classification and labeling. But the other point is that you really have to set up, for example, in the poison centers, but also in the consumers, this understanding for corrosivity being either for the eye or for the skin. That's really a challenge. We face also in Austria, when we talk to the stakeholders, we have maybe now 1.5 years ahead of us, but the people that receive this information are not there, not at all there. Yeah? So there is still a lot to inform and to educate on this new CLP system, just on this small piece of corrosivity.
And who do you think should this education do? Is this something the industry need to do? Is there a collaborative effort? How should one do that?
Yeah, I think it's really a collaborated effort, and I think in many member states this is actually what is happening. Yes, that the Chamber of Commerce liaise with member state competent authority, that big industry association provide information. When we prepared ourselves in Austria for today, we were together with Poison Control Center colleagues, so we also saw from this side. So yeah, it's still to be developed, but there is definitely a need there to do something.
Okay, very good. Yeah, Jacques?
Yeah, maybe because the question I think is extremely difficult to answer in terms of whether you really see a direct, let's say, improvement of health and the environment as a consequence of CLP. But maybe give it a little bit broader perspective in terms of what REACH and CLP together want to bring here, and that is actually by having a much better information on all chemicals on the market and a much better information through the supply chain. We actually do believe, and I think we see that also, it's also been studied already, that actually the situation is improving in terms of better information, and therefore also, in the end, that has to lead to more safety to human health and the environment. What is also interesting is that actually the trust of the general public in chemicals has gone up over the last couple of years. Whether it's directly related to REACH or CLP is probably a difficult question to answer, but it's an interesting, let's say, trend, and I think we should all try and work to improve that and bring that trend further into the future, because one of the problems we have in general, I think, is indeed, as was one of the earlier speakers referring to, is a very low trust in chemicals as such. And I think if we can do something about that, including having better safety warnings, I think we will probably reach a lot.
Okay, very good, super. Psycho, our time is almost up. I thought we got a few new insights, good insights about the publishing of experts that we have already, then also a formulation which we run through A to Z, the communication of on the new methodology. Any other parting thoughts that you have before we close the panel? Any message that you want to leave, particularly here with the industry, on what should still be done? So you don't have to, but if there's anything on top of your mind, here's still your opportunity to leave it with us. Yeah, David, and then Françoise as well. Françoise, yes.
As we explained, the success of, and I think I heard that from your side as well, the success of the whole system, DetNet, would be linked to the fact that it would be broadly used. So I would like to give a call also to authorities in the course of learning, getting to learn the tool and getting eventually trust into it, to please help us in providing this, because this was taken as a very important argument to convince companies to use it, that the authorities will recognize it. So I'm just coming back to the collaborative approach I was presenting, but for us it's key for the success of the project.
Well said. Yeah, David, you still have a thought?
But my parting thought, Hans, is that I would like all of us, whether on industry side or regulatory side or whatever, to make sure that we base our conclusions, our classification and labeling on the hazards to human health. It's human health we're trying to protect, so we don't want to be labeling in a way that predicts what happens in rats or rabbits or in vitro cell systems. We should try and have its foundation always in what happens in humans.
Okay, very good. These sounds like good closing comments. Is there? Yeah. Can you need a micro, and if you could then introduce yourself and your affiliation, and then we'll just patiently wait for your question.
Hi, thank you. My name is Carmen Pan. I write for Chemical Watch. I just had a practical question on the fees, because I cannot find information on the fees anywhere, nor on the website or in the press release. So I was just wondering if you can give me an idea of the fees for members and for non-members. And also you were mentioning about the share of data that companies can do. If you can also give an information of how that would work and possibly how expensive that would be. Thank you.
Good. I'm sure we can deal with that question. Who is volunteering? Sylvie, Gérard? Yeah.
I'm just looking at Sylvie. The fees are actually on the website. In the section how to join I here in the...
Yeah, I think I saw them there too when I checked yesterday, so, okay. You get a second mic.
They're basically in the range for a membership subscription, so annual subscription, they're in the range of 200 euros to maximum, I think it's 5,000, very max, for the annual. And then you have a classification fee, which will be applied on every successful classification you manage to derive via the system. And this is in order to finance the data compensation system. But for the maintenance, for the IT, for the help desk, for all the administration, this is covered by what we call the membership or subscription fees. And it depends on whether you're on your turnover, so whether you're an SME or not, and whether you're a member of an association or not.
Okay, very good. Yeah, that answers the question. There was a second part of the question, I think. Could you repeat the second part?
You mean the data compensation?
Yes, because as as far as I understand so far, the data that is there is only coming from your project, the in vitro project, right? But then companies will also be offered opportunity to share data that they have and they want to share.
Correct.
And then get something in return for that.
Yeah. So currently, the main chunk of the data is actually historic in vivo data from companies that was delivered to I.S.E. Well, ages ago, and has been extended with in vitro data on similar formulations, and has been extended with additional formulations with in vitro data. And there's a clear call from I.S.E. now to companies to share additional in vitro data with the system. The data composition is according to, as far as I recall, the typical REACH rules for data composition. So just applies all those rules so that companies sharing their data are compensated in a very fair way.
Okay, very good. Yeah, that deals with a question. I don't think there's any more questions. That concludes the panel. Thank you very much for making time with us this afternoon.